Okay, welcome everyone to Growing Good Humans podcast. My name is Lara Barr. I'm the owner and founder of Emerging Educational Consulting. We provide one-to-one mentorship for families and parents and students from the beginning to end of the college application process. We wake up every day to grow good humans, and what better way to grow good humans than to empower with education and information. I am so excited today to welcome Jaime Smith. Jaime, I've known you for a long time, and I am so blown away and impressed with your new book, The Complete Guide to College Transfer. Yes, there it is, beautiful green with, just beautiful typeset and everything. I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then I'm going to dive in. We had a lot of people with a lot of questions. And I have some of my own personal questions. So why don't you just start? And here we go.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here. I've been following your work here in, growing good humans. And I just love that approach to it because I think that's what a lot of us do. I'm also an independent consultant and I specialize in non-traditional students. So transfers, adults, homeschoolers, anybody who's taken kind of a different path to higher ed. I just really believe that there is a college out there for anybody who wants to attend. There is a path to a degree for anybody who wants one. And so this book kind of emerged out of that feeling like there's a whole group of people out there who maybe aren't getting the information that they need. So, and I've spent years in education. I've been a teacher at, high school and college levels. I've seen students come and go in different situations. And I just wanted to put more emphasis on this group of students that, doesn't have a lot of resources. There aren't a lot of other books on the shelf. I think mine might be the only one. Sometimes I think they're forgotten when we're talking about college, that there are ways to move between schools, back to schools, or start at a community college and make that your path.
One of the things that we often talk about in college consulting, and you being an IAC, this is that one of our hopes is that we find that fit, right? And that students don't have to transfer. So transfer isn't brought up that much because I think at the beginning, parents are like, I don't want to talk about transfer because we're hoping we get this right.
Right.
I'm curious if you're seeing a trend towards more students transferring today than ever before.
Yeah, I am. And it really started with COVID, I think, because there were so many students who suddenly had to make a decision without having visited the campus at all. Everything was shut down and they were just choosing a school that they'd never stepped foot on. And so after that, I saw a lot of transfers because once they got there, they realized it wasn't quite the right fit. I think that really does highlight the importance of campus visits. And I also see that, students are struggling more than ever before with mental health. This generation that has gone through this very traumatic event, when they get to college, sometimes things are challenging. Sometimes they're not totally prepared for this new level of academic difficulty and rigor. And so sometimes those things get in the way and can really, give them a different college experience that maybe was not the one that they intended to have. It can put things in a different light, and maybe they realize they need a place with better supports or closer to home, or, a different topic they want to study, or maybe they need to take some time off and then go back after they're feeling a little bit more prepared.
Yeah. How common is transfer?
Shockingly common. A third of all students transfer at some point before getting their degree. It's amazing to me that a third of undergrads do this, and yet we never talk about it. We hope it's just never going to happen, but yeah, it's very common.
When I first started my college consulting practice, we didn't have transfer students because we didn't have like the clientele yet of people who might be transferring. But I have been shocked at how actually complicated it is to transfer. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to transfer and I'm going to apply, right? Like there's just a lot of steps, and I don't exactly have a question around that, but maybe comment.
Yeah, just commiserate on the fact that it is so complicated, and students often don't realize that. They think they've been attending an accredited university, so they can just pick up their credits and move to a different university, plop those credits down, and complete a degree. And it is really not that simple. The application process itself is very different, and every college is unique in how they accept those applications, when the deadlines are. Just everything it's the Wild West. It is not standardized in any way. I mean, even first year applications can be wildly different, but transfer takes it to a new level, truly. But then the credits, that is just so complicated. And I think that's the thing that students don't even realize. They're kind of blindsided by it, that there's a lot of research you can do in advance to find out how your credits will transfer. Will they really apply to your next degree, or are they going to be lost somewhere or turn into elective credits only? There are just so many things that can go wrong there that students aren't even aware of. And sometimes they land at the next school and realize they've extended their whole degree plan by a year because they weren't really looking at that feature, So a large part of the book goes into some detail on that, because I think students need to be more aware and be doing more research in advance on that to make sure that they land in a good spot.
Are transfer students treated the same at all four-year universities?
For the most part, and they should be, but I think there are some schools that go the extra mile to be really welcoming and create a place where transfer is normalized, and, it's not seen as something shameful or something to be hidden, but they have a transfer center, they have transfer mentors, peer mentors, they really make transfer visible. So, I find that the students are generally not treated differently, but that doesn't mean that every school is equally welcoming and fellow students are equally welcoming. Some schools work hard to make that the culture of the school to be so welcoming,
It seems like it'd be like that number one tip before you even consider transferring. Do research on their transfer policies and inclusion, because that's the real stuff, is like, how do I find that group of new friends when everybody else has their first year? Can I join a fraternity or sorority? Those kinds of things. I have some specific questions from our parent community that are related to families who know that. Let me give you an example. Like, students maybe, and these are probably the students you serve, their high school years didn't go great. They have maybe C's, maybe a 2.1, maybe a 2.2, right? Like, they're not going to have the options for the schools if they go straight from high school. So they want to go to maybe a Colorado school or a community college, which I know you talk a lot about as a way to kind of work into more of those university programs, right? The bigger university programs. But it seems tricky to me. Like, you want to get your grades up, but then you want to transfer that next year, but you haven't completed all of those 24 credits. Maybe you didn't even know you have to have 24 credits to be seen as a transfer before you go in. So what would you advise a family like that?
Yeah, not everybody wants to hear it, but often the best path is a 2-year community college commitment, so that you would be transferring as a junior. And sometimes the students are so eager, they wanted to go as first years, but the grades aren't quite there. So they think, well, I want to go then as a sophomore. But if you're looking at that quick a turnaround, you're probably applying at a point where you have one semester of college grades. The universities that you would be applying to as a transfer are not going to be able to see you as this completely different person based on one semester's worth of college grades. They're still going to be looking at your high school record. Whereas if you go that extra year, if you become a junior transfer and you get to 60 units, you've got a solid college record to base your admissions on. And for many systems, they don't even care about high school. The only question they may ask is, did you graduate? Do you have a diploma? Everything else, it's like a fresh start. You're starting over at the community college, and you can totally rebuild your transcript, your academic record. I've seen some students go that path and end up at some really selective universities. They may have struggled in high school, but they had the drive once they got a little bit older to prove themselves at community college and go through community college honors programs. I'm a huge fan of those. And then be able to gain admittance to some of the top universities in the country. So, it pays to be a little bit patient. I think if you're rushing it, you're not going to have as many wonderful opportunities as you could.
how do you coach students who are really hoping for that kind of college experience with the idea of community college? Are there ways that you've helped coach students on creating communities? Like, they don't want to be living at home. Part of launch is what, parents and students are looking forward to. Do you have any tricks? I think a lot of people, or at least people that I work with, the idea of community college comes with some stigma.
Absolutely. Yes, there is definitely a stigma out there, and I'm constantly trying to fight that stigma. And the stigma is honestly well founded in history. It's one of my little tidbits in the book that, most community colleges were founded to sort of be a diversion to keep out the riffraff from the elite 4 years. Like, they were intentionally designed to be this lesser tier for, what the people in power thought were lesser students. So yeah, it's not surprising that we have this stigma that we're still fighting like 150 years later. But community colleges are evolving, and they know that students want community and a sense of belonging, and they want to, have all those things that would come with a first year experience at a 4 year. So more community colleges are introducing housing. I think we're at about 30% of community colleges nationwide now have housing options. So you can go away to a community college and live there. There are also like partnership programs where a community college is maybe near a 4 year university. We have that actually in my neighborhood. The community college and the public flagship are like 2 miles from each other. And so students can be enrolled in both, and they can live in the dorms at the 4 year university while they're taking their community college classes, with this whole plan to have an automatic transfer. Everything is very tightly integrated, and that can be a great option. They've got that sort of guaranteed admission to the 4 year as long as they meet certain requirements at the community college. And in the meantime, they're living on the 4 year campus as they would if they were 4 years. So you just kind of have to look for some of those programs. Even if there aren't opportunities to live on a community college campus or near one, there are other elements of community. And then you can go looking for something at the 4 year where when you transfer, you'll have community there. Housing isn't always available for transfer students. So I always recommend looking into that. Find out if the schools you're targeting have transfer communities. That can be a redo of that first year experience if you can go to a school that has specific dorms for transfer students, because then you're finding your people, you're meeting other people in that same position, and you're recreating that first year dorm experience, which I will just say, it's overrated. I don't know what you think, but my daughter was so sure she wanted that first year dorm experience, and then she hated every minute of it.
Well, I think it's always a surprise when you get there and you see the dorm and it's smaller than, it's like a half of your bedroom, and that you have to share a bathroom with like 30 other people. Sometimes, like, it's quite a surprise. I think that is true. And a lot of people today aren't used to having, there's not like big families with siblings where people have had to share one bathroom and that kind of thing. I have a parent who's asking, gosh, could you list off a few of those 4 year college, 4 year community, or some community college? Could you just be more specific on some of those that people could look into?
Oh, yeah. Ones with strong communities. So I'm on the West Coast, so I do have a little bit more knowledge of those. So like where I live, I'm in Eugene, Oregon, by the University of Oregon. And our community college, Lane Community College, has that agreement where you can live on the U of O campus and be taking your classes at Lane. They also have some of their own housing as well. It's not quite on campus, but it's close. I know that in California, Santa Barbara City College now has housing, so students can attend there and be living, I think it's a converted building, but they're living on campus as they go to the community college. And then they've got this very clear pathway to UC Santa Barbara, which is incredibly well respected, So there's a list out there somewhere, which I can find you for your show notes. If you want to share, I'll get that link for you so you can find community colleges that have housing. And beyond that, be looking for clubs and honors programs. Phi Theta Kappa is a great resource for finding like honors programs at community colleges. So that's another really good resource for somebody who's academically motivated and wants to find community. Honors programs are a great place to look for that.
I love that. That's such a great tip. What is the most common mistake that someone who plans to transfer to a four-year university might make?
Yeah, it's not looking carefully at those course requirements, how credits will transfer, what are the minimum requirements to transfer. Sometimes students think, oh, I can just, take whatever. Nobody's telling me what to do at the community college. I'm going to take all these fun classes.
Mhm.
But many universities have specific prerequisites. You've got to take an English composition. You have to take a math. Some will require a second language. So be looking at those requirements and get those things done early. Beyond even just being prerequisites, some universities will say you have to complete those by, the fall before you're going to transfer. Like you can't even wait till the last minute. They want to see that you've completed them and have grades before they're going to admit you. So be looking at your target universities, what they require. You can even ask them questions. Most of them will have transfer advisors on campus. And you can reach out and say, I'm hoping to transfer. What should I be doing? Go to your community college transfer office and ask them what you should be doing. Get both sides, see what the community college thinks you should do and what the 4-year that might take you in thinks you should do. Of course, that only works if you're in community college. If you're in a 4-year and you're thinking, I want to move, your options are more limited. But you can still reach out to potential other 4 years you might want to transfer to.
I think there was a question. Let me see. It has to do with can you transfer away from and then back to a 4-year university? I'm not even sure I understand the question. So maybe clarify the question and then.
Yeah. So a lot of people do that. Maybe they're in a 4-year and they feel like, they're overwhelmed. Maybe they want to take a little break, or maybe they haven't done well in their classes and the 4-year is actually saying you need to take a break. You're on some sort of an academic warning and you need to go, clear your head and take some classes at the community college to rebuild your record. So yeah, you could potentially go from a 4-year to a 2-year, rebuild your transcript, and then reapply to that original 4-year. And the 4-years can handle that in different ways. Sometimes they have a specific re-entry application that's, shorter and simpler and is basically just, are you really ready to come back? Let's see your community college grades. Sometimes it really is that you're applying for transfer. Sometimes it is more like that, especially if you've been away for a long time. But it's totally possible to do that. And a lot of students do. And those numbers aren't even really tracked very well because it doesn't show up as a transfer. It shows up as you started at a 4-year and you ended at the same 4 years. So the transfer piece kind of falls through the cracks. So really, when you start counting those things, it's probably more than a third of students who transfer at some point.
This is kind of this is kind of a sideways question, but do college credits expire?
Such a great question. And it kind of depends. A lot of answers in transfer are, it depends. Yeah. Technically, no. Once you've earned your credits, they are yours to keep. You've got them, no problem. But will they be accepted by another university? That's where it kind of depends on the university, and it can also depend on the field. So if you've got, say, English literature credits and you were specializing in Jane Austen, those credits are pretty unlikely to expire. Nothing big has changed in the field of, English literature in the last 10 years. They're probably not going to throw away your credits because they're old. Some colleges will, there are some that just put we're only taking credits earned within the last 10 years, and they just put a limit on it. But most are going to be like, no, that's fine. Nothing changed. If you're in a field where there is current evolving research, so computer science, biology, things where new stuff is coming out all the time, those may expire. Not in that they're no longer useful to you, but they might not transfer into your next program because they'll want you to take the newest version of those classes and get the most current information. I have seen workarounds where students who've maybe, there may be adults who've been out of college for a while and have been working in the field they studied. Sometimes there can be exceptions there. So yes, we acknowledge those credits are really old and there is probably a lot of new information, but because you've been working in the field, you've been keeping your knowledge up. So sometimes it's on a case by case basis. So it's really something that you have to look at for the target university and the age of your credits. In my book, I have a bunch of case studies, and one of my favorites is actually an adult, almost 50, who had 8 transcripts spanning 30 years and still got her degree, still managed to get everything in and finish her degree. So, if you find the right place that's going to support you, you can get it done. But, some schools are going to be pickier about those really old science credits.
I have a family in the community who is asking a question about athletes who may, for instance, hockey players who go play for 2 years. They have their high school transcript, SATs, is it the same process when you're 2 years out of school and you've been an athlete and you start with the Common App, or do you?
Yeah. So we're saying this is a student who graduated from high school and then didn't do any college, but went and played hockey for 2 years. And then they're thinking they want to go to college.
Right.
Yeah. That student would still be a first year student. They would just be, an older first year student. But if they take any college classes during that time, even something that seems like a stray unit here or there, one throwaway community college class that you weren't even really thinking about, or that one online class, then you have to check the rules, and transfer is defined differently everywhere. Some schools will say the moment you set foot on a college campus, you are now a transfer. It doesn't even matter if you finished a class there. If you were enrolled in a class, you are now a transfer student. At other schools, they'll say once you get to, 12 credits, then we call you a transfer. Under that, you're a first year. Some systems will say you are a transfer student, but we're not going to accept you because you haven't met the minimum number of units yet. So sometimes you can even end up in limbo where you're neither a first year or a transfer. So it depends on the accepting school. But if we're talking about a student who graduated from high school and took no college after that high school graduation date, they are still going to be first year students, athlete or not.
Okay. That just reminds me of a student that I had once who had taken time off, was doing the athlete, and the parents were like, we really just want you to take one class. And he was halfway through the class, and we realized, oh my gosh, all these how it impacts, because he wanted a first year experience, period. He did not want, so he withdrew from the class. So it wasn't on a transcript or anything, right. But even that it seemed like if you read the bottom line, they didn't even like that.
Yeah. And it varies by school, but I did have a student who, this was during COVID, went to community college, signed up for a few classes, was really struggling with the online format, was struggling with mental health, withdrew from all of them, but didn't withdraw by that deadline that just deletes the classes. They withdrew by the deadline that leaves a W on the transcript.
Right.
And then when they came back around and wanted to attend college, they were like, I'm ready. I've been working. I want to go straight to the 4-year. And the 4-year he wanted to attend, we said, what is this, a transfer student or is this a first year? And they said, actually, he needs to go back to the community college and earn at least 12 credits to be able to apply as a transfer. He cannot apply as a first year because he has a record, even though the record is W's, even though 0 credits were earned. He could not apply as a first year, had to apply as a transfer, but wasn't eligible as a transfer because he didn't have enough units yet. So that was a super frustrating situation, but it is within the letter of the law at some of these schools. So you do have to read the fine print for any individual school, and don't be afraid to reach out because sometimes their policies aren't clear. So just ask.
It's such bureaucracy for these kids and families. I mean, it's like we always are like, let's get kids to college, let's get them their degrees, college matters. And then there's all these doors that
so many barriers.
And barriers that it just makes me really sad.
Yeah.
But, let's talk about this. What about jobs and graduate schools? Do they have opinions about transfer students?
No, in many cases, they're not even going to know,
Yeah,
you
that's
know? Your diploma only says where you graduated from. So they're only going to know if you tell them. Grad school, yes, they're going to want your transcripts. They're going to see transfer credits on there, but they're as long as you got good grades and took the right classes and have strong letters of recommendation, they don't really care about the combination of credits you might have. Employers usually don't care about the transcript at all. They're just seeing your diploma. And I will add, if you say went to a community college and earned an associate's degree and then transfer and earn a bachelor's degree, why not promote that? You've got 2 degrees. Maybe they're not even in the same subject. Maybe they're in adjacent field, and that just makes you doubly qualified for a job. And I sometimes use my daughter as an example. She was my first transfer student. She's 25 now and gainfully employed and finishing graduate school. So she did all those things. She proudly puts her associate degree on her resume because she actually got it in a different subject than she ended up getting her bachelor's degree in. And she feels like that just makes her all the more qualified for jobs. So I try to reframe things like that. Don't be embarrassed of your community college or your transfer, turn it into a plus. It could be a real positive for you if you frame it that way.
I think that fits with some students today who are aiming for more highly selective schools because of the admissions rates, that are present right now. Many students are deferred or denied from schools. And so they're like, I'm going to stay in state and then I'm going to transfer. Mm-hmm. Is that working? And are you seeing that working? But they're still only applying with their first semester grades from that institution. So I have some clients who it has been working for, but I'm just curious what your take on it is.
Yeah, it can work, but honestly, if it's a school that rejected you, the odds that they're going to accept you 1 year later with just 1 semester of college credits under your belt, it's unlikely unless there is something just really significant about your record that changed. A really amazing senior year that they didn't get to see, really stellar first semester grades, internships, research, something just truly extraordinary that would change things. It's unlikely to work unless you've got that kind of significant change. But, it can work. I've seen it happen too, and plus you've just got that situation where every year is different. What the schools are looking for may be different. So it's possible that you fill a different priority for them that next year.
It's so like let go of that school, but they're applying to different schools that they didn't have on their list before. That kind of thing.
I think that's more likely to be successful if you kind of get a fresh start and look at your application holistically in the place where you are now. I think that's generally more effective than, I didn't get into that school and I really want to, so I'm just going to do that 1 semester of community college and try again. And then I'm going to do a year of community college and then try again. You really have to be doing something different to make that work.
One of our favorite programs, and I'm watching the time carefully because I want you to talk about your book for a second, but one of the programs that we work very closely with is Verto, and their Verto education. And I think that is an alternative way that's not like, hey, let's go on an adventure, let's get those credits, and then we can transfer because they have partner schools.
Yes.
We have a podcast on that for families who are interested, and we'll put that in the notes. But we have 2 minutes left, and you've spent all this time creating this beautiful book. I love it. It is right by my desk when I can find it, but I have it downstairs. It has like coffee marks on it and everything. And I didn't bring it to my desk. So put it up one more time.
Yes. The Complete Guide to College Transfer.
Important thing you hope your readers will take away from this?
I hope that it makes it feel possible to transfer, whether you're thinking, I don't have a path to a degree, I don't know how to get there, or you're thinking I'm too old, I can't go back and do it. Or you're thinking I'm in a 4-year and I don't like it and I'm stuck. I just don't want anybody to feel stuck in any situation. You can always make a change. You can always do something different. You'll have to weigh the pros and cons, and maybe it'll take more time than you thought it would, but it is always possible to make a change. So I tried to include everything I could think of to guide students through that process, no matter where they're starting, to see a path forward that they can get their degree. Because I have rarely run into a student where it's just not, I can't say I've ever run into a student where I just go, oh, there's no path for you. There's always a way. There's always a path. It's just finding the school that's going to be receptive to what you bring to the table. Yeah. And if I could say anything about the book, I will also say it is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook now. So I know I was really concerned about accessibility. I wanted it to be available to everyone, no matter what kind of a learner you are. And so it is now out in audiobook as well, if you prefer to listen.
That is great. Are you the reader?
I am.
That is so fun.
I had to audition.
Wow, congratulations. Well, I think, at the heart of all of this, when we think about growing good humans, I think that we're inviting students and parents to be using flexibility in their thinking. We're inviting families to have an open mindset, and that there is not just one path. And when we can release ourselves from the idea that there is just one path, there's so many doors that will open, even if that means you have to go back to community college and get those 12 credits and then apply. Jaime, thank you so much for your work. I hope this is one of many times we get to connect.
Yeah.
And we'll post this on all of our channels, and everybody will listen, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.